going to pause it there and get us to move on to the impacts of aquaculture on Flathead, just because I am conscious we've got about 17 minutes left in this session, Sean, so you might have to move through fairly quickly, but I think it's fair to say there were three sort of themes that emerged from discussion around salmon farms and Flathead, and that is what is the research saying about impacts of salmon farms on Flathead, particularly in the channel? And has any environmental benchmarking been done on nursery areas and the impacts of salmon farms and water nitrogen levels in these areas on Flathead growth rates? And is there a link between salmon farming and Flathead getting smaller and less of them? And is this only happening in areas of salmon farming?
Right. So if I work backwards, perhaps, no, because we're seeing this happening in other areas where there aren't salmon farms. So it's not just salmon farms. I think there's a lot of work that's done on the monitoring of the impacts of salmon farms. It's a very heavily regulated industry. We do know that the channel, and the Huron, it's not a pristine water body, and it hasn't been for a long time. It's been disturbed by many factors of urbanisation, agriculture and land clearing, which has massive nutrient runoffs into a semi-enclosed waterway. Salmon farming absolutely has an effect, but all farming does. All impacts on whether it's land or water whether it's farming have effects on land. You look at biodiversity issues. You literally take 100% of the biodiversity out of a paddock by removing all the trees, shrubs, bushes, possums, habitat, blah blah blah, to put a single crop in there. So everything has an impact, and that's just part of us being humans and wanting to consume both protein, but also crops as well, because that monoculture concept is the same for soy plants as it is for herding cows. I think that there can be little debate that it's had an effect. Whether it's affected the flathead in these populations, it's unlikely. And that's based on some assessment from our research teams of just looking at the benthic habitat that the sand flathead live in. We do know that most of the impact, the habitat impact, is about 35 metres from the pen, but there's regular monitoring and compliance to the lease boundaries to make sure that the habitat's not getting too degraded. At a whole of channel scale, there's these broad scale environmental monitoring programs that have been running since I think 2009, 15 sites all through the channel. So again, there's links to those to go and have a read. There's evidence from research in Norway and the Mediterranean on the specific interactions of fish farms with generally more pelagic fish, so like cods and saithe and other things, rather than the full benthic animals, that suggests that fish farms are either neutral or actually mildly positive in their effect on fish species. So looking at this from a regional perspective tends to indicate that most of the fish are probably not greatly affected. The other one is pellets in the diet, and the studies that have been done again overseas are that there's not, it's only a proportion of their diet. They're not reliant on that as a single dietary item. So there's a link here to, I won't play it just because of time, but so this here is a link to the IMAS Salmon Interactions Research YouTube page. This is an experiment they were doing where they were dumping a handful of pellets under the cage. You also see fish poo here, which is the more orange stuff. There's a couple of flatty in there, bottle, nice. Some mackerel, etc., coming in. And basically, this is a time-lapse photo, and it shows them clean up the pellets very, very quickly, and also all the worms, etc., dealing with the poo. So there's not piles or mountains of poo under the cages, and the flathead are quite happy to live there. And as you'll see in a sec, they're opportunistic carnivores, so they'll eat whatever's there. That's also why they were very catchable for a long time. So there are two links here again. So there's the monitoring report, and then our salmon interaction team at IMAS has their own webpage with some really interesting research on there. And then more directly to the question, we've got a project submitted to FRDC at the moment, and it's directly asking this question: understanding interactions between the aquaculture industry and Tasmania's key recreational commercial fisheries. So this is likely to get funded, and again, as I said, we're still on a learning curve, but our evidence at the moment, looking at their habitat, would suggest that it's not having a big impact on them.